You think you can just walk in here and act tough? Maxwell snarled, his fists balled up, knuckles popping like firecrackers. The hallway of Elevate High School buzzed with students, their eyes locked on the scene unfolding by the lockers. Your quiet little act won't cut it, new girl. Before we get started with this story, let us know where you're tuning in from. We love hearing your thoughts and seeing where everyone's watching. Jane, the new transfer student, stood with her back pressed against the cold metal lockers. Her braids hung neatly over her shoulders, but her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her backpack straps. She lifted her chin, her dark eyes catching a spark of defiance. "I'm not here to play games, Maxwell," she said softly, her voice steady despite the quiver in her fingers. "I just hope you'd leave me alone. But if you push me, you'll see who I really am." Maxwell laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed down the hall. He stepped closer, towering over her, his broad shoulders casting a shadow. "Oh, I'm shaking," he sneered, oblivious to the storm brewing in Jane's gaze. He had no idea that in just 5 minutes he'd be on his knees, begging for mercy on the scuffed concrete floor. The crowd around them grew thicker, phones already out, recording every second. Jane's heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. She wasn't weak, not really, but she'd learned long ago to hide her strength until the moment was right. Moving to Elevate High from her old school in Chicago had been hard enough. New town, new faces, new rules. She didn't want trouble, but Maxwell, the school's resident bully with a chip on his shoulder and a posse of snickering lackeys, had zeroed in on her from day one. "Leave her alone, Maxwell," a voice cut through the tension like a blade. The crowd parted, and there he was, Darius, the school's track star and unspoken protector of anyone Maxwell targeted. His tall, lean frame moved with purpose, his sneakers squeaking on the floor as he stepped between Jane and Maxwell. His eyes burned with a quiet intensity, and his voice carried a warning. "You don't want this fight." Maxwell's sneer faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly, puffing out his chest. "Darius, man, stay out of this. This ain't your business." "It's my business when you're picking on someone who just got here," Darius shot back, his voice low but firm. He glanced at Jane, his expression softening for a moment. "You okay?" Jane nodded, her lips pressed tight. She hated feeling like she needed saving, but Darius's presence was a lifeline. She wasn't ready to show her cards yet, not in front of everyone, but Maxwell wasn't done. He shoved Darius's shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. "Big hero, huh?" Maxwell taunted. "Let's see how tough you are when I'm done with her." He turned back to Jane, grabbing her backpack and yanking it from her grip. Books and pens spilled across the floor, and the crowd gasped. Jane's eyes flashed, but she stayed rooted, her hands curling into fists. "Pick it up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maxwell laughed again, tossing the backpack to one of his friends. "Or what, new girl? You gonna cry?" Darius stepped forward, but Jane held up a hand, stopping him. The air crackled with tension. Her heart raced, but something inside her shifted. She was done hiding. Done playing small. "Last chance, Maxwell," she said, louder now, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Pick it up." The bully froze, caught off guard by the steel in her tone. For a moment, the hallway was silent, every eye on Jane. Then Maxwell smirked, stepping closer. "You're gonna regret this," he growled, raising a fist. What happened next was a blur. Jane moved faster than anyone expected, ducking under Maxwell's swing with the grace of someone who'd been trained. Her foot hooked behind his ankle, and with a quick twist, she sent him crashing to the floor. The crowd erupted in gasps and cheers. Maxwell scrambled to his feet, his face red with fury, but Jane was ready. She blocked his next punch, her movements precise, almost effortless. Years of self-defense classes her dad had insisted on were paying off. "Stop it," she snapped, grabbing his wrist and twisting it just enough to make him wince. "I didn't come here to fight, but I'm not your punching bag." Maxwell yanked his arm free, his chest heaving. "You think you're tough now." He spat, but his voice wavered. The crowd was no longer on his side. Their phones were still recording, but now they were cheering for Jane. Darius stepped closer, his presence a quiet anchor. Walk away, Maxwell, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're done here. Maxwell's eyes darted between Jane and Darius, his bravado crumbling. He took a step back, then another, muttering under his breath. This ain't over, he said, but the words lacked bite. He turned and shoved through the crowd, his lackeys trailing behind him. Jane exhaled, her shoulders sagging. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her legs shaky. Darius knelt to gather her scattered books, handing them to her with a small smile. You didn't need my help, he said, admiration in his voice. But I'm glad I was here. Jane managed a weak smile. Thanks for stepping in, she said, her voice soft again. I didn't want to fight. You didn't, Darius said, standing up. You just showed him who's boss. The bell rang, and the crowd began to disperse, whispering excitedly about what they'd just seen. Jane clutched her books to her chest, her heart still racing. She'd stood up to Maxwell, but the weight of being the new girl, the one who had to prove herself, still pressed down on her. Over the next few days, Jane tried to keep a low profile, but the video of her takedown went viral at Elevate High. Kids she didn't know gave her nods of respect in the halls, and even a few teachers seemed to look at her differently. But Maxwell wasn't done. She could feel his glare across the cafeteria, his wounded pride simmering like a storm about to break. Darius, true to his nature, stuck close. He wasn't just strong, he was kind, always checking in on her between classes, sharing his lunch when she forgot hers, and cracking jokes to make her laugh. You're not alone here, Jane, he told her one day as they sat under a tree in the courtyard. Maxwell's all talk. He's not going to try you again. But Jane wasn't so sure. She'd seen guys like Maxwell before, guys who couldn't let a loss go. And she was right. That Friday, as she walked home from school, Maxwell and his crew were waiting for her in the alley behind the convenience store. Thought you could embarrass me and walk away, Maxwell said, stepping out from the shadows. His two friends flanked him, their smirks mirroring his. Jane's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't want trouble, she said, her voice steady. Just let me pass. Maxwell laughed, but it was forced, nervous. Nah, you're gonna learn your place. Before Jane could respond, a figure appeared at the mouth of the alley. Darius. He'd been walking home too, and something told him to check on Jane. You really don't learn, do you? Darius said, his voice cold. He stepped forward, his fists loose but ready. 3-on-1. Real tough, Maxwell. Maxwell's bravado faltered again, but he doubled down. This ain't about you, Darius. It is now, Darius said, his eyes locked on Maxwell's. Jane felt a surge of gratitude, but she wasn't about to let Darius fight her battle. She stepped forward, her voice firm. Maxwell, you don't get it. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. One of Maxwell's friends lunged, but Jane was faster. She sidestepped, grabbing his arm and using his momentum to send him stumbling into a pile of trash cans. The crash echoed through the alley, and Maxwell's other friend hesitated, clearly rethinking his choices. Maxwell's face twisted with rage, but before he could move, Darius was there, grabbing his collar and pinning him against the wall. You're done, man, Darius said, his voice low and dangerous. You touch her again, and you'll deal with me. And trust me, you won't like it. Maxwell's eyes widened, and for the first time, Jane saw real fear in them. Okay, he stammered, his hands up. I'm done. I swear. Darius let him go, and Maxwell stumbled back, his friends scrambling to follow. Let's go, he muttered, and the three of them disappeared around the corner. Jane let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling again. Darius turned to her, his expression softening. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle now. She nodded, but tears stung her eyes. I just wanted to fit in, she whispered. I didn't want this. Darius put a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and steady. You're stronger than you think, Jane, and you don't have to fit in. You just have to be you. The next week at school, things were different. Maxwell avoided Jane, his head down whenever she passed. The whispers about the video died down, replaced by a quiet respect. Jane started to feel like she belonged, not because she'd fought, but because she'd stood up for herself. Darius was always there, a steady presence, and a friendship grew into something deeper, built on mutual respect. One day, as they walked home together, Jane stopped and looked at Darius. "Why do you always have my back?" she asked. He smiled, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk. "Because I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. And because you're worth it, Jane." She smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She wasn't the weak girl who'd walked into Elevate High. She was stronger now, not just because she could fight, but because she'd found her voice. And she found a friend who saw her for who she really was. As they walked, Jane realized something important. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you have to fight. It means knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone take it from you. Maxwell had learned that lesson the hard way, but Jane had learned it too, and she carried it with her wherever life took her next. True strength isn't about fighting or proving yourself to others. It's about standing up for who you are and building connections with those who lift you up. Bullying thrives on silence, but courage and kindness can break its hold. Be part of our community and share in these meaningful stories. Just hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can start your day with inspiring lessons and heartfelt moments.